Hello, Yu-Gi-Oh players, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. So what you are seeing today on this particular Dark Arm Dragon Month duel is I'm going to be using my Chaos Dragons to fight spirits. Now, this spirit deck is actually kind of inspiring me to try and create a spirit deck of my own. I've been playing around with a couple things, and it's been working pretty well so far. I think that this guy gave me some good ideas for some engines that I could use for the deck, but I don't think he's using it to its full extent. So he's going to add Feng Shuang to his hand with Aratama, and then add that Aratama back to his hand. Now, what you're going to see throughout this duel is the fact that the spirits are really good at creating uh, hand advantage, at getting cards into your hand, which is really important. Now, I make the mistake of setting Eclipse Wyvern. I'm not entirely sure what I wanted to accomplish by doing that. I could have just normal summoned it and attacked directly and ended this probably a little quicker. But I decided to set it. So he summons the Aratama, he uses its effect, and he does something really interesting here that I kind of like. So he uses its effect, he chains Torrential Tribute, and then he chains Chain Summon, so that he can get two more extra normal summons. So he uses the Aratama to get its Search, which he uses, I believe, to get, what was it? It was either like Izanami or Dark Dust Spirit. Um, Anyway, so what I'm probably going to do with this Eclipse Wyvern is banish my Dark Arm Dragon. So he grabs a Yaksha, which is the spirit that bounces spell and trap cards. So I decide I'm going to use my Wyvern to banish Dark Arm Dragon because, Dark Arm Dragon. Um, and that is my move right there. I'm not sure why I'm running a Return from the Different Dimension in this deck. It's pretty good, but it's really bad for this deck early game because you don't actually do a whole lot of banishing in this deck early game. It's mostly graveyard setup. But whatever. It's one of those cards that just ends your game. And somebody was talking to me recently about how Return from the Different Dimension is only useful in dragons, which is just silly. As I would demonstrate in another duel if I had actually recorded the one where I OTK'd with Return. So I chain Maxi to his Kagetokage, which he summons, and chain to the Aratama, which he is going to use to search out another spirit monster. Um, so far he has used two of his three summons that he gets off of Chain Summon. So as you're seeing here, he's generating a lot of cards via Aratama, and he's going to grab another Kagetokage with the King of the Feral Imps that he is going to special summon. So the things I've been playing around with the Spirit deck, and I'll show you guys a profile a little later if you guys want to, is I've noticed that a lot of people don't take advantage of the fact that spirits add themselves back to your hand during the end phase, um, which means that while they could be using them with cards like Creature Swap or a little fun thing that I've been messing around with that I'll show you guys when I make my deck profile, you can actually gain some really good spot removal, take control of your opponent's monsters. A lot of good stuff can come from that effect. Not to mention, if you switch control with a spirit monster, you can use Legacy of Yatagarasu to draw two cards off of it, and instead of just one, and get your plus off of that, it becomes a chainable Pot of Greed, which is kind of nice. And I special summon my Trigodia after he attacks with that King of the Feral Imps, which he used to get another Kagetokage. Um, so this is where things get kind of weird, I believe. Yeah, he uses his third summon to get Izanami, which he uses to discard a card to get Aratama. He discards the Yaksha. Um, and so this is very similar in style to the build that I want to make. Since you're going to be generating a ton of card advantage, I kind of like just using that and finding fun ways to mess around with the sheer huge numbers of cards that you'll have in your hand with this deck. As a result, I think this guy runs too high a monster count. Spirit deck really doesn't need to run that many monsters. So I run over his King of the Feral Imps, and here's where I do one of my favorite plays that I love to do with Chaos Dragons, especially when I'm playing in the mirror match, is I use the Tragodia to discard Red MD and take control of his Tragodia. Now I'm checking to see if I have any rank 10 monsters in my extra deck just for funsies. Or any rank 5s that I could use with the Dark Flare Dragon. to summon. So instead, I just used the Trigodia's effect to steal the Trigodia. So now instead of one 3,000 beater on the board, I have two 3,000 beaters on the board. So I think that's pretty cool. So he draws for turn. He's probably going to summon an Aratama because that's what Spirit decks do. Aratama is basically the best card in the deck. Yep, there it goes. It's probably the most important thing to the deck. It gets you a lot of your card advantage, and it gets even crazier with things like Creature Swap. So he adds Dark Dust Spirit. Now this guy runs a lot of Tribute Summon Spirits, which I kind of don't like, because I feel like I'm never going to Tribute Summon a Spirit monster, but that Chain Summon really helps with that. So he does Creature Swap, and I decide to change control with my Trigodia instead of his Trigodia. I don't know, just because. Um, so now I have an Aratama and a Trigodia, and he crashes our Trigodias. So it didn't really matter in the end. He's just going to add that Aratama back to his hand, which is one of the really cool things you can do with this deck, is you can just grab your opponent's monster, one of your opponent's monsters, power it up or do something with it, and then run over your other opponent's monster, and then just grab that Aratama back to your hand and have it ready to use next turn. So I draw into a Light Pulsar Dragon, and this is basically the point at which I take over the game. Because once I have the Light Pulsar Dragon in hand, once I have that red MD in grave, I can essentially begin taking over the field. So I banish my Wyvern and my Trigodia to summon Light Pulsar Dragon. And then I'm going to add that Dark Arm back to my hand, and do not worry, you're going to see that Dark Arm come to the board sometime during this duel. So Dark Arm hits my hand. And now I'm in actually a really good position, because I have a Divine Dragon Apocryph, which can reset any dragon monster I want from my grave. I have my Wyvern Burster, which can restart my combos. I can use it defensively to keep my opponent from OTKing me. I've got a Gore, speaking of OTKs, and I've got that Dark Armed, which is already live, I believe. And if it isn't live, I can make it live pretty easily. If he destroys my Light Pulsar, I can just discard my Dark Flare or my Apocryph and my Wyvern Burster in order to summon it, and then I've got a live Dark Armed as well. So he goes for the Pot of Duality, which he is going to use to add a Battle Fader to his hand. So I have to remember that. So I'm not going to try an OTK under a Max C or something, because I know he has that Battle Fader. Now, Battle Fader is another way that a Spirit deck can use its Tribute Summon monsters, and I've been considering using that in my Spirit deck. It's really helpful because, you often leave your field devoid of monsters in this deck, so you want to have that Battle Fader there to keep yourself from getting too much damage. And it also allows you to summon things like Dark Dust Spirit and Feng Shuang, which I still don't really like, because you always end up with that Dark Dust Spirit in your hand, and you're going to have to end up like discarding it for Izanami or something in order to make it, decently live. And that'll just add an Aratama, which can probably add you some better stuff. But all in all, I'm not a big fan of that tribute summoning thing with the spirit. So I grab the Dragon Ravine out of my deck, or I draw it rather, and that actually allows me to set up pretty nicely for another time. But for right now, I think I have a different strategy in mind. I see that I have Red Eyes in my graveyard, and I have Divine Dragon Apocryph in my hand, so I could replace one of the cards in my hand with a red MD and then banish the Apocryph to summon the red MD. That would lose me a little bit of card advantage, but I already basically have control over this field right now. And what I want to do is establish even more field presence than I had before. So I want to add that red MD to my hand. I'm not entirely clear on why I didn't attempt to do something else with this red MD. I guess I didn't want to special that Dark Flare because it wouldn't help me, and it would be a little more overextending than I really wanted to do. It's kind of too bad that you can't special summon Dark Armed except by its effect. And of course I run right into that Battle Fader, which I expected to happen. I mean, it's probably a good thing that you can't special summon Dark Arm Dragon with Red MD, but it would be kind of cool if you could, just so that us Chaos Dragon players could mess around with it a little more. It would really suck in I mean, it would be amazing in Inzectors, but it would make Inzectors really take over the game because of the extreme abuse of Call of Haunted in that deck. Um, so he draws for turn, and I'm pretty sure he's going to use that Dark Dust Spirit he added to his hand. Because I've got a much bigger field than he does. And so that's exactly what he does, is he normal summons the Dark Dust Spirit in order to destroy my field. He gets kind of obnoxious about telling me to destroy my cards, or he's just kind of being weird. So I use Light Pulsar's effect. I call it Light End Dragon, but whatever. I summon the red... Now, here's one interesting thing that happens. He cheats here. And I didn't notice it while I was in the game, but I noticed it as I was watching. In order to special summon Izanagi, you have to banish a spirit from your hand. There is a monster that can be a spirit monster that can be special summoned by banishing a spirit monster from your grave. It's like Yamato no Kami, I believe. And Yamato no Kami is actually a pretty decent card. I think I'm tempted to use one copy of that in my spirit deck because it can take out back row and it's special summonable, which means that you can mess around with it a little. So he uses Swordbreaker, which I didn't quite expect, calling dragons so that he can just run over my red MD. So this is kind of a problem because he managed to get rid of both of my dragons in one turn, which is basically what you have to avoid having your opponent do in a Chaos Dragon deck. So I draw into a Collapse Serpent. And this is the part where I'm kind of considering my options. It's at this point that if I use Dragon Ravine, I can summon that Dark Arm Dragon and start, wrecking the board. But I do also have a couple of other moves that I could potentially make. For instance, actually, I have no idea what I was just thinking of. Using Dragon Ravine is probably my best option in order to try and put some monsters in the grave in order to set up for Dark Armed or for Dark Flare Dragon. In all honesty, Dark Flare Dragon wouldn't help me much right now, so I think my best option at the moment is to discard either Dark Flare Dragon or Collapse Serpent. I choose the Dark Flare Dragon to send another Dark Flare Dragon to my graveyard. There aren't any other dragons that I would really want in my graveyard right now. If there were any dark dragons that, had effects once they were in the graveyard, that would be great. But I don't really have any that I can think of. So I am ready to summon my Dark Arm Dragon, and he just kind of gives up on his Swordbreaker. He sends it to the graveyard before I even summon my Dark Arm, because he knows that I have it in my hand. So I specialize the Dark Armed, I use it to destroy the Swordbreaker, and then I attack directly with it. So right now I'm actually not in as good a position as I was earlier on in the game. I had the Light Pulsar Red MD thing before, and it just didn't, he got rid of that, and that was basically the greatest advantage this deck has besides Dark Arm. Dark Arm really is what gets this deck running later in the game. And I am glad to have that. So he's going to overlay with Kagetokuge and Izanami. What I would have gone for right here is a Diamond Dire Wolf. What he went for was, I don't remember, but it wasn't a Diamond Dire Wolf. Because with the Diamond Dire, he could pop my Dark Armed, it would be out of the way, and I would probably be scrambling for some plays. But he's looking at his extra deck, considering his options, and he goes for a Cowboy, which is actually an equally good move. I just didn't think of it, because I always forget about Cowboy's other effect besides the dealing 800 for game part. So he now has that Cowboy on the board, which he can use to run over my Dark Armed, and he once again banishes a monster from the graveyard to summon that Izanagi, which once again is an illegal play. And then I take my 2200 from Izanagi. Now, my challenge right now is to get rid of both of those cards, and I draw into Violon Prism, which is essentially the best thing to have in my hand when I have one of my mini Chaos Dragons. because if I just normal summon that Violon Prism, he's usually not going to try and bottomless it or something. But so he's going to have to try and get rid of my Collapse Serpent and my Wyver Burster, which probably won't work because I can then just search out another. Um, so I summon that Collapse Serpent. Usually I would summon that Violon Prism first in order to kind of avoid suspicion. And then I'm going to Synchro Summon with both of them. And it's pretty much at this point that he starts scooping up his cards, I'm pretty sure. So that is what it looks like when Chaos Dragons take on Spirits. I actually really want to try making a Spirit deck that's kind of similar to this one. Um, it's a little more trap heavy and a little less heavy on the monsters just because there's so much deck thinning available. You don't need that many monsters. Um, so I decided to search for them both, and I think, yeah, this is the point at which he starts drawing cards and flipping out. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button and all that rest of the stuff that I usually say. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the RJB0, and enjoy what is left of this duel. I got a jet, guys. See ya. Is this really how that's going to go? I'm going to wait here for another minute. Suppose I could edit out the rest of this video. Why would I do that? You guys would miss all the fun rambling I get to do at the very end. Looks like I got about 30 seconds left. Um, Thumbs up. Subscribe. I don't know, what do YouTubers usually say when they don't have anything else to say? Alright. See ya, guys.